go. Look, I was able to fade my audio out and everything. This is like the first time in months that that's gone well. Hello, I'm John Park, and this is John Park's Workshop, and thank you so much for stopping by. I am more thrilled about that than I probably have any right to be, but hooray! So that is a new little song I wrote, and I thought it was appropriately bleepy and bloopy for our topic today, which is going to involve pixel art and retro gaming. Hey, Dastels. Hello, C. Grover, Mr. Certainly, FX Music, Andy Calloway. A whole bunch of great people are in the chat over on Discord, so please, why don't you join us? And hello, Ardana. Greetings from Flagstaff, Arizona, over in the YouTube chat. All right, you got a Pikachu there in your icon, don't you? I see you, Pikachu. Hey, Henry Caballero. Hello and hi. So let's get going, huh? We've got some fun, exciting, interesting stuff to talk about today. Let me just raise this camera up a little. There we go. So the first thing I wanted to do is get some housekeeping business out of the way. And first off, I wanted to mention our jobs board. Are you familiar with the Adafruit jobs board? We have a jobs board, and in this very jobs board, you can go and post your skills if you're looking for work, or post if you are looking to hire someone. And the great thing is it is free for everyone. So jobs.adafruit.com, go check it out. In fact, Mr. Certainly posted a link in the chat there on Discord. Let's see. Let me pop open this browser. What is going on in this browser right now? Oh, that's not the one I expected. Let me switch this out. Hold on. So all the smoothness of my audio transfer earlier is now erased by me getting the wrong window involved. That's going to turn into a black hole over there. And there it goes. It's turning into a black hole. Hold on. We can do this. Which one do we want? What's in that one? Crossing fingers. No. Do I still have that window open? Stand by. This is the one that says Adafruit Jobs. Okay. This is the third time. This is the charm. This third time. And there it is. I have found it. All right. Yeah, so there is our jobs board. And if you take a look there, there's a little video explaining how the jobs board works. And then we've got some jobs posted right here. Printed circuit board electrical engineer in Virginia. They're looking to hire full-time. Embedded software engineer at Accenture Mind Tribe. That sounds pretty awesome. Go check it out. It's in San Francisco, California. All right, so that's the jobs. Go check them out. Now, I'm going to show you a little thing that is the coupon code of the week. And this is going to get you 10% off in the Adafruit store. You just use the word pixels right there. And that's going to get you 10% off on all the stuff that you want. And there's a lot of good stuff. In fact, today I'm going to be showing the main project is related to our PyBadge. I'm going to be talking about pixel art today for game sprites. And the PyBadge is now coming soon in the store, so you can go sign up for alerts on that. So go check it out. And if you fill your cart with stuff you can buy, then use this coupon code to get 10% off today. And speaking of the store, I've got a pretty cool product of the week to show this week. And this is the Zero for You Pi Zero USB hub. I've got one over there on my desk. Let me flip over to that camera and check this thing out. This is a 4-port USB hub that sits right on top of a Raspberry Pi Zero. And you can see I've got a keyboard and a mouse plugged into it right here. And I've still got 2 more free slots on it. This is kind of this funky screen, HDMI screen that I've tacked to a board here. And there I've got the Pi Zero. Let's see if that'll focus. Yeah, so there you can see I've got the Pi Zero. And so this Pi hub, this Zero for You Pi hub, uses pogo pins, little spring-loaded pogo pins, to connect to the Pi, and once it's connected to the pins it needs for power and USB, just screw it down with the nylon screws. And now you got a really nice compact thing, because this is, the Pi Zero is amazingly small, or Pi Zero W is the one I'm using in this case. But it's only got one USB port on it, and it's a USB micro B. So you always have to use some kind of extender hub, like an on-the-go OTG hub, to connect things like mice to it. Now, you can certainly go wireless with these, but sometimes you just want to plug wired stuff into a Pi Zero, and this thing is a really cool solution for that. In fact, let's pop up let me go back to my Firefox here, and there it is. Let me show you some of these other pictures of it. There's the 04U hub. It can be used with non-Zero Pi boards, and in which case you can use it just like a regular hub, and you'll plug in over this mini connector. But there you can see there's a nice demonstration of someone making the most out of having 4 ports to plug stuff into. This one especially makes sense for the Pi Zero if you don't have a Pi Zero W, and so you might use this to add a Wi-Fi and a Bluetooth dongle to it, as well as something like mouse and keyboard. And check it out. That's what's on the bottom side of it, and it has, I think it's 4 pogo pins here and here, and these sandwich onto the board. You can see the little pogo pins there as well. So that's my product of the week, is the Pi Zero hub, USB hub. I think it's about $10, not bad. All right, so you know what? This brings us to the MakeCode Minute. All right, so let me bring up my browser here. I'm going to close that out. So what I want to talk about in the MakeCode Minute today, so this is going to get a little confusing. Oh my gosh, I'm really hidden behind it there, aren't I? Let me see if I can move that a bit. How's that? A little better. So what I want to talk about in MakeCode Arcade is using the walls to restrict where your sprite can go. Later we'll talk about creating the sprite and some other good stuff. But right now let's talk about how you can use the walls of the screen to restrict where your sprite can go. So let me show a demo. I'm going to launch the simulator here, and now I'm going to move my character, and you can see when my character hits the wall, it's actually going to bounce. I don't know if the frame rate is high enough for you to see it online or not, but my Adabot head is actually bouncing when it hits the wall. And so the way that I'm doing this, you can see here in MakeCode, I've got an onStart block, then I have a background image that I've painted. I've created a sprite with this artwork for the Adabot head of kind player, and I'm moving the sprite with the buttons, and I've actually set it to be a little faster velocity than the default 100 and 100. And then here's the key sprite. Set my sprite bounce on wall, and I've turned that to on. And if you look in the scene, is it in scene? No, it's in sprites. I'm going to go up to sprites. You'll see this, where'd it go? Oh, hold on, I've got to, there it is. So there's this set my sprite to stay in screen, and it's turned on or off. If I bring that into my scene here, that's actually the same as this one, and it just has a drop down. So stay in screen means that it'll just stop and stick when it hits the wall like this. So if I turn stay in screen on and check the simulator, when I hit the edge, it just stops. And so a nice piece of feedback that you can give to the player is this bounce on wall, so it's a little more obvious that they really can't move any further. There's not like a door here that they're somehow missing. It's just simply a barrier. And so that is how you can use MakeCode Arcade to have your sprite bounce when it hits the walls. All right, and actually, I also wanted to show this. Let's look at this in the overhead. So this is actually going to tie into what we're doing today for our main project. Let me get that out of the way. And if you look at the downshooter, in fact, let's go to the big version of that, and I'll become little here. So you can see in the PyBadge here, I've got the same sketch loaded, and actually I think you can see that a little better, that bouncing action. You'll have to forgive some of the noise there. I think I've got some video flicker issues. But there you can see as Adabot reaches the boundaries, her head is simply bouncing off of the edges. And we can do more sophisticated things with this using tile maps, but this is a really easy single block solution inside of MakeCode to simply say you can't go further than these walls. It's kind of a little black box node. All right. So now before we move on to the main project, I actually wanted to do another little quick look at what is going on my workbench. And so let's switch over to the workbench cam and the main cam. How about like this? Let me head over here. I'm actually going to move this Pi contraption of mine out of the way. Set this over here. And I'm very excited. Right before the show today, I got in the mail a package from a company called Handheld Legend. I bought a little kit for my Game Boy. I'm going to switch cameras, actually. Let's give you that as the big view. Oh, I think that's working. So this is my Game Boy DMG. That's the original Game Boy. It stands for Dot Matrix Gamer. That was the original name. Now, if I turn this on, one of the things you'll probably recall is that the screen on this thing is pretty terrible. I can fool around with the contrast. Also, we're getting a lot of flicker there. That flicker is just my frame rate colliding. But there we got Kirby on there. And the problem is that it's essentially a reflective only screen. You got to get light on it. If it's dark, you can't see in there. Also, I've got a scratched up lens, this cover part here. So what I got is a really nice glass replacement lens. It's not scratched and it should resist scratching. That'll go over the top there. And then this is a kit that replaces the backing of that existing screen with a backlight. I've gotten a sort of washed out yellow color is what they call it. It kind of looks like the green of the original. And it has a polarizer that goes over the front. I also got this thing called a bivert chip. And the bivert chip makes the dark pixels look better over the backlight than by default. I actually don't know what that's doing. I don't know what it's biverting. So I need to look that up, and if anyone's real familiar with this, please explain it. But essentially, as it says here, enhances display contrast. So this is a good mod to add along with the backlight. And then I also got a couple of little replacements for the contrast knob. I think it may actually be the same pot for the volume knob too, but this contrast knob here, even though I've sprayed some deoxit in there and gotten it to work a little better, it's super touchy. So I'm going to see if replacing that potentiometer helps out. So I'll keep you posted as I add mods to this thing. And I also picked up some games. So this was an existing one I had. That's a Pokemon Pinball. And I had Alleyway, which is like Brick Out. I picked up Tetris for like $3 at Game Dude. I got Kicks. I don't know how you pronounce that. Quicks. You know this one, right? It's like a old vector scope game from the arcade where you fill in little shapes on the screen. And I got Quarth, and that was Kirby who suggested that, our own Kirby from the chat. So lots of Game Boy action. But let's now move on to pixel art, which is appropriate, I think. So let's head back over here and let's fire up a little tiny me in the corner and some pixel art. So I'm writing a guide right now. It should be out either tomorrow or sometime over the weekend on creating pixel art for your character sprite on the PyBadge, but it's going to be done in MakeCode Arcade, so it actually works on a whole bunch of different hardware. And so just sort of coming to terms with the fundamentals of pixel art, I think is a really good idea because it's going to apply across pretty much any gaming platform that uses two-dimensional sprites. And we're going to be able to use this within CircuitPython on the PyBadge, as well as if you use Arduino on it or MakeCode. So it applies in a whole bunch of circumstances to know how pixel art works. So what we're looking at here, this is Mario from the NES Mario, the original NES Mario. And some interesting things to know when you're getting going with pixel art is the dimensions that you have to work with. In this case, this is a 16 by 16 pixel area that we can work with, and the color depth. So this is a 2-bit image in this case. It has 4 colors to work with, one of those colors being transparency. And sorry, this is a confusing image because you see black behind him. You might think that that's a black pixel. That's actually transparency. That's would be knocking him out over whatever background he's on. So now if we look at the evolution, here's a 32 pixel by 32 pixel from Super Mario Brothers for the SNES. Here you can see the size of the pixel has grown, or the size of the sprite rather has grown. We have 32 by 32 pixels to work with, and we now have 16 colors to work with. So you can see right now this palette that I have on the left. This is kind of a simulated image. I built this in Photoshop just to help you visualize what's going on here. But this simulated palette is 16 colors, actually 15 colors and a transparency. And this is probably placed by hand. It may have been worked out on graph paper first and then put into the computer programmatically. Nowadays, we'll use graphical interfaces to do that. And one other thing I'll point out is if we look at the continued evolution of Mario, here's a Mario, I think this is from the new Super Mario Brothers game on Nintendo DS. I am suspicious that this was actually rendered from a 3D image. I don't think that was hand painted by someone. There's some people who are masterful at this kind of shading, but I suspect that that was a 3D model that was rendered and posed, probably came from existing art that was for a Wii game or a Wii U game or a Switch game. So there was a 3D model running in a 3D engine, but in some cases sprites are derived from that. So you'll see this one has probably 16-bit or 24-bit color. It's got bazillions of shades of every color, which you can see that's not just one blue for his overalls or one red for his shirt and his hat. It's a ton of gradation, which is what can give it that shading. Another interesting thing to look at are sprite sheets, and we're going to talk in the future about animation for character sprites, but if we look at these are the resource files pulled from the games. Here's, again, from NES Mario. You'll see there's actually 2 different sizes of Mario when he gets a power-up mushroom and he gets big, or the regular size is that sort of squat one on the bottom. And again, we have these limited color palettes, which can be swapped out. So I think this is Luigi here, who's got the green and white, but he's going to say self-consistent with his one color palette when he's on screen. And then you can pull them up for other games. So here's from that SNES, Super Nintendo system, some Mario, Super Mario Brothers sprites of him going through his animations. Also wanted to bring up, so here is not just old games, but new games that are in a restricted sprite size and color palette for artistic reasons, not for technological reasons, because essentially most game systems today can handle basically unlimited color palettes and really huge numbers of pixels. But if you look at this is a game called Celeste, which is for Nintendo Switch and was originally written as a little small in-browser game, and it runs on Pico 8 and a bunch of other platforms. But if you look at Celeste here in this image, first of all, this is a pretty limited color palette for the entire scene. You can see the greens are shared, or the browns are shared between the characters and the house there. If we look at the Celeste itself, this is, I think, 16 pixels high. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6. Yeah, this is a 16 pixel high. It might be 12 wide, but we're going to work with square canvases when we look at things in MakeCode Arcade, just because that's generally an easy way to go. You can use some other shapes 2 by 1 ratios and such. But here's Celeste. So she's essentially 16 by 16. And look at her color palette. What's she using? 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 11, and transparency. So she's got 12. Max Lubson just asks over on YouTube, is this live or pre-recorded? This is pre-recorded, but we predicted you were going to ask that. Not true. This is live, mostly live. It just takes a couple second delay. I'm sorry for being a smart aleck. Good question, though. So if you have questions, ask them. Or if you have info you want to share, please go ahead. The other thing I'm going to talk about in the guide that I'm doing, I'm going to place some resources. And one of my favorite resources are some tutorials written by Mini Boss Studios, who are the studio that did the art for Celeste. Here is an example from one of their tutorials of creating a little shovel. And you can see they're kind of going through stages. I skipped one. One was just using black to define the outline of the shovel. Then they're going in and using flat colors to define the pieces of the shovel. Then they're doing a pass in this middle image where they're adding some shading by using additional colors or taking, for example, that orange from the handle and using it to look like a highlight on the wood. And then the final stage there is actually some anti-aliasing, which you may or may not be able to see on this broadcast, but essentially anti-aliasing I'll talk about in the guide. It is a way of removing jagged, stair-stepped images, which are essentially unavoidable in the sense that we're using square or sometimes rectangular, depending on the display, but generally square pixels to represent things that are curved or diagonal. You're going to get these stair-stepping jaggies. And what we do is we kind of play a little trick, a little optical illusion to reduce the impact of that by filling in some of those high contrast jagged areas with averaged colors. So you'll see in the case of the shovel on the right, the jaggies actually now have grown a little wider with some light blue, which makes it look like a softer, maybe a little more blurred image. So that's anti-aliasing. And modern software like Photoshop will do it automatically if you ask it to, but it's also done by hand in many cases in pixel art like this. So we're going to talk about the editor inside of MakeCode for creating sprites. And I've got a little guide, a little image here that's going to go in the guide that gives you a tour of it. But why don't we jump over to MakeCode and we'll do that part right in front of the camera live. So let me switch over to, let's put a black background back there. And there we go. So inside of MakeCode, whenever you create a sprite, and we can make a new one. I'm going to duplicate my Adabot sprite here, and I'll make a new one called Sprite2. And let's go in here to the editor. Are you seeing this? Let's bring this up a little higher. 1 second. If it lets me. Sorry, it's going to jump around a little bit. And bear with me, I'm actually going to trim some of the screen here and scale it up a little bit. All right, so you'll just see me sort of peeking out from the side there. Okay, so here is the pixel art editor that shows up inside of MakeCode whenever you create a new object that needs a sprite. You can click on the image of it, or sometimes that'll just be gray. And when we click that, we get this sprite editor. Now, I duplicated an existing one, so let me go ahead and erase this right now. So you can see, first thing, I chose a bigger brush, so the pencil tip size is up here at the top. So you can see I've got this kind of big brush, and I'm using that. You can use it with the pencil or the eraser or even the shape tool. So I'm going to use it with the eraser and just clear that out. I don't think there is actually an automatic clear out function. So going back now to a blank canvas, you can see at the bottom here it lists 32 by 32 pixels. Quick question from Max Libson in YouTube chat. Does MakeCode have only the block coding or does it have line coding as well? Yeah, you can code in JavaScript here as well. So you can do more sophisticated things in JavaScript than you can with the block editor, particularly for Arcade. So you can see here I can get an 8 by 8 image. Let's start with that. So how about we'll lay down some pixels. And you can see you're restricted to that is as small as a pixel can be. All right, so we'll make maybe some sort of Space Invader looking guy. How about, there we go. So 8 by 8, that's all you get. There are no subdivisions of those. Those are your pixels. If I hit done right now and run the simulator over here, I can move Adafruit over the way, and you'll see that little teeny blue pixel looking thing there. That's my 8 by 8 sprite. Let's move it. I'm going to head to sprites and change the position of sprite 2. And you can actually do it graphically. So I'm just going to move it over here to the side. And then when I relaunch the simulator, you see there's my little blue icon I made. So let's go back to this sprite. We can actually make it bigger, but there's no scaling in here. So if I say, OK, how about a 16 by 16 pixel? It just leaves what you had drawn in there. So essentially, I'm just going to get rid of this and do something new. You can use much more sophisticated pixel editors. I'm going to put some links in the guide for some free and even paid, but there are some really great free pixel editors that work in browser that have things like scaling your images, copying and pasting parts of them, and so on. But for ease of use and getting started, it's hard to beat having the editor built right inside of MakeCode here. So here you can see now I can still continue to just draw individual pixels, but I can also use the shapes. If I want to make a square, let's say, this will allow me to drag out a rectangle of some kind. And now rather than drawing around in here to fill this up, I'm just going to use this fill bucket tool. And again, it's just going to fill with whatever color I've got picked. So we can swap over. How about purple? And now we've got a purple, orange, red, and so on. And then there's a couple of little tricks here. If you, let's say, go back to the pencil tool, and I want to put some blue stripes in there, you can start drawing, and if you got a steady hand, it's not too hard, but sometimes you'll do like that. There is an undo, so I can undo that. If you want to turn that pencil tool into a line tool, hold the Shift key. And so as I hold the Shift key on the keyboard, you can see that the icon changes to this arrow line, and you'll also see that the square changes to a circle. So if I hold that down, now as I drag, it is dragging the end point of a line. Now you can see this is a really good example of the aliasing, right? I'm trying to draw a diagonal line, and if I get it at a perfect 45 degree, I'm going to get exact stair steps. But that line tool is really helpful for doing this sort of stripes kind of thing here. And now let's increase this to 32 by 32 because the circle is difficult to see in a smaller area. So if let's go to black. Let's make a black circle. So if I hold down Shift and I've got the square tool picked, it's going to change over to the circle tool. And there you can see it's drawing out sort of square to begin with, and then sort of a rounded, diagonal cornered sort of octagon. And eventually it gets big enough that it's sort of circle-like. But again, you can see in this amount of space, it's a pretty tall order. If you are doing something curved, you can start your circle outside or actually at the upper boundary of that. And then you can start using the fill tool, for example, to make whatever this thing is. It's maybe it's Mickey Mouse wearing some Kanye glasses. I don't know what it is. In fact, let's see what that looks now. Another question from Max in the YouTube chat. Can you upload the program to a Raspberry Pi and use with the new game button hat? You can, in fact. Yeah, you can. If you go to learn.adafruit.com, there is a guide for using MakeCode Arcade with the Raspberry Pi. Could be Pi Zero, could be a regular Pi. And in fact, I've shown this on the show before. I have here somewhere. Where did I was hanging it right off the edge of my, there it is, workbench. This is a Pi Zero with the little game bonnet on top of it with the D-pad and the buttons, so you can play games that way too. Now, if we look again back at the PyBadge here, let me hide that out of the way, and we'll go full screen on the PyBadge. this is now working with MakeCode. So as these are coming online, you'll be able to put the bootloader on here for using MakeCode Arcade. And then like we saw before, now I'm just using this ATSAMD51 is the processor on here. It's a M4. And then we've got the little screen A and B buttons, start and reset, which actually takes us to a menu in MakeCode. And then we've got our D-pads and our little character. So let's live dangerously. Let's build a sprite to add to this. So let's go back into this one. I'll make it about 16 by 16, and let's clear this out. Okay, and but that, by the way, was the square tool using a large brush as well as the transparency. So you can essentially, there is an eraser here, but there's really no difference between drawing with transparency or erasing. So you can use all these tools with transparency. So let's make our Ruby the LED. So I'm going to go in and just roughly make a sort of LED shape here. Actually, I don't like that. Let's take that one off and let's make it a little skinnier. And let me erase that corner there. So I'll flood fill here, and let's put in some eyes. So I'll go ahead and do, whoops, that was, oh, I tried to undo and it closed my sprite. Darn. All right, come back. Let's try this again. All right, let's do 16 by 16. There you go. Erase. And now let's go back to drawing in our little domed top. How about like that? Yeah, what happened before is I grabbed the flood fill and not the pencil with white instead of red. And so now I'm going to grab that flood fill, make sure I've got red picked. There we are. Now go back to white and do eyes. So these are kind of inspired by Pac-Man ghost eyes here. Let's make them a little taller. Oops. And we'll do big smile. I don't think Pac-Man ghosts smile. And we'll do some little legs in here. Now you'll notice we've got a limited color palette, like I mentioned. So I'm going to, instead of going with like white for the legs, which are made from metal, I'll go with maybe a purple, this kind of dark purple, and I'll make one a little bit longer than the other. This will actually come in handy for doing animation. I'm going to bring those in a little bit later. And you can see you've kind of got to make choices and exaggerate things a little bit when you're working at this small scale. So let's erase that other leg there. Okay, that's kind of cute. So I'm going to hit done. And now when I run the simulator, I'm going to see I've got that little sprite sitting there. So that sprite is actually not going to do anything when I use my controls, because right now my controller is set to move the main sprite. So I'm going to switch this over to sprite 2. And I know we're almost out of time, so I'm just going to upload this to the device, and then we'll check it out on here. So I've got my device paired on here. I'm going to download it. I may need to actually just drag it to the board. I'm not sure if that download direct is working right now. Oh, sorry, you were not seeing that. I'm so sorry. I bet people were yelling at me in the chat that you weren't looking at it. Yep, can't see a darn thing. Sorry about that. Okay, so now you can see it's downloading the game. Here is what I just made while I was talking about a thing you couldn't see. Very sorry about that, but the tutorial will go over it in much greater detail, so look for the Learn Guide. Yes, Andy Calloway, sorry about that. So this I've now saved, and I'm switching over my move controls to use sprite 2 instead of the Adabot, which is sprite 1. I've downloaded the game, and you won't see this part, but I'm just going to go out to my Finder, and let me turn on this camera real quick. I'll hide that, and I'm going to press reset, And we can see it's gone into bootloader mode. This is currently changing. I think this will say PyBadge when it's ready. But now it's essentially acting like a USB flash drive that's showing up in the Finder for me, and I can drag that downloaded UF2 file right to it. You can see it's going to blink a couple times, and then it should restart. And now the game has our new character in there. So you can see now I can move, whoop, my little LED around. My LED is very fast. Also, it does not respect the wall bounce because I didn't tell it to. So I can fly right off the screen, which gets very confusing because where'd your character go? So it's probably a good idea to add some constraints or have the camera follow your character if you're making a bigger tile-based background game. So I hope that that was not too confusing because I missed showing you the canvas there for a minute, but that is a real fundamental to just making your basic sprite, and then in the guide I'll go into some slightly more advanced techniques and also point you at some great resources for some really advanced techniques. And then in the future we'll be taking on some other things like animation for our sprites. So with that, I will sign off. Thanks so much for coming to John Park's workshop, and I will see you next week. Bye-bye.